Welcome to My Therapist is Out. Each episode, we talk with a therapist from Open Space Therapy Collective or LGBT community members about mental health and building community. I'm your host, Renae Johnson, licensed therapist and founder of Open Space Therapy Collective, where we are your hub for queer and trans mental health care. As we dive into today's topic, please keep in mind that this is a mental health podcast. We will talk about sensitive and difficult issues that are not appropriate for all audiences. Please take care while listening. Welcome back to My Therapist is Out. I really hope that you enjoyed our Neurodiversity series. I know I got a lot out of the conversations with Mikey and Jenny and listening to the different therapists talk about different aspects of neurodiversity. And while we are on a break, Mikey Whited, Psych NP, and I are here to answer a few of your questions. So we'll be here for short little Q&A this week and then in 2 weeks. And then after that, we will start our next series on healthy relationships, queer relationships, and can you do it if you've only seen toxic ones? So join us for that. But in the meantime, Mikey, it's good to see your face. Yeah, of course, always. All right, let's just dive in. So we've got a few to start us off about understanding neurodiversity. So how do I know if I'm neurodivergent, and what does getting assessed actually look like for adults?
So there's a couple different kind of ways to look at that. But, you know, for neurodivergent things, kind of like noticing that maybe you do things in a different way than other people. You tend to respond to things in different ways. Communication in certain areas seems harder. Because there's such a giant spectrum of what neurodivergence what like being neurodivergent looks like and feels like. It's kind of not like a one size fits all, but getting assessed would be going to traditionally like getting a neuropsych evaluation, which is neuropsychology is this very specific branch of mental health. And that's kind of the best way to kind of suss out, are we dealing with neurodivergent stuff? Are we dealing with some maybe personality differences? Are we dealing with trauma? That's a really good way to suss that out. Also, just go talk to either a psychiatrist, a Psych NP, or certain psychologists is fine too. But just mental health providers in general can kind of guide you down the right path. But I don't know if you can really like get like the official diagnosis from a therapist.
No, typically most therapists that you'll see for your weekly or biweekly sessions are there to help you figure out how to work with it. But you want to go and get the assessment from somebody who is specifically trained in these assessments, because they're very rigid assessments. They're peer reviewed, they've developed over years and years, and they're very specific. So there's a couple of psychologists that we typically refer to for the neurodiversity that we see most often: autism, OCD, ADHD, dyslexia, all of those things. Mm-hmm. But when you come to therapy, you also might be like, I'm pretty sure I'm ADHD, and we'll run through a handful of questions that are pretty standard. And sometimes you don't need to go and get an assessment done because you're like, this fits me. I can work with this. Like, for example, I've never gone to get a dyslexic assessment, but it's pretty clear by the way that I struggle to read, write, and how I say things backwards that it's there. So it hasn't been a need for me to go and get that assessment because it's pretty obvious. And so I'm just adapting the tools as I can.
Yeah. I mean, technically the gold standard is to get a diagnosis for ADHD at least before age 12. And most people don't have that. Or at least not always. But then it's more now when you do the assessment, they're kind of looking back through lifespan to be like, hey, these things have consistently been stuff you've struggled with. Or, you know, sometimes also once you start managing one set of neurodivergent things, you discover the other ones that were hiding because other ones were causing more of an impairment in your life. So it's kind of sometimes you peeling the onion, you're like, oh, there's so much more onion to go.
It does, as you're saying that, it does make me think about Jenny and our conversation with her and how important it is, if you think your kid might be neurodiverse, to get them actually assessed as a minor, because there is a lot of resources that you have access to if you get assessed as a minor versus if you don't get assessed until you're 19 or 30 or 40, you lose access to a ton of those resources. So if you're a parent, go do the thing. It's only going to help.
Definitely, because also when you are in school is when that help is really, really important to get, because it like otherwise you're just kind of setting them up to be behind and playing catch up later, versus getting the assistance you need early. You can kind of, stay in mainstream classes to continue to have more of a normal education.
Yeah. And these assessments are not like you sit with somebody for an hour and it's over. They're multiple sessions. They're very specific. It takes a long time. So if you're going to go in and do that, be prepared that this is going to be several sessions over a month or 2 months or maybe more, depending on what's going on.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just one really long day, depending on how they're going to do it. So I've had some friends that have gone and just gotten the full assessment in one day, but man, it was like 6 hours.
That sounds
miserable. I don't know.
miserable.
I don't want to do that. My
Thank you.
30-minute sessions are just fine. Going to the actual professional is definitely the way to go.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Can trauma or chronic stress make someone seem neurodivergent even if they are not? And the answer is
yes. Yes, I have. I've had some people that are very close to me in my life, and over the years, that was later they're like, so it turns out it was PTSD, not ADHD, and it was like, But at the same time, it was that was the cause, but it was also causing problems with memory, focus, attention. Those things were being affected, but it just, you can take ADHD medication and it doesn't change the fact that this is all happening because of the trauma and how the trauma has kind of changed the way that your brain functions and interprets information.
100%. I think because I specialize in trauma, I get a lot of people with trauma. Some of them do have neurodiversity stuff, but almost all of them come in being like, I've got trauma and OCD, ADHD, whatever the neurodiversity thing is. And when we dig in, most of them don't actually have that. And if there's stuff that sticks around, it tends to be OCD presenting symptoms, but it's typically not actually diagnosable OCD. It's the way that the trauma, especially the chronic trauma, has changed the way that your brain has developed. So there are tools in these neurodiversity worlds that can help, but it's not going to be the same thing. And that's not how we're going to work with it long term, because we need to address the trauma stuff.
Yeah. And that's kind of one of the things is those symptoms will stick around until we deal with the thing that's causing it. I mean, there's definitely a lot of overlap and a lot of things that can make someone seem like there's something like neurodiverse stuff going on. And sometimes there are both. You can definitely get both present at the same time. It's just, which is really causing the impairment that we're working on at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Memory, you mentioned, hypervigilance, rumination, struggling to sit still.
There's also the emotional dysregulation, which is a part of ADHD that we don't always talk about. But there's ADHD and autism spectrum. Our emotions can get really big, really fast. And it's just kind of, is this what they call alterations in arousal and reactivity from trauma? Or is it that you have ADHD, a small thing happened and your emotions just kind of went poof? They'll look the same.
Yeah.
So, that's why it's also kind of hard to suss that part out sometimes. It's well, it looks the same.
Mm-hmm. But it's not.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
All right. Next question. What's the difference between ADHD, autism, and sensory processing differences? And can someone have more than one?
Oh, yes, you can. ADHD is also an established diagnosis. Also, autism spectrum, established diagnosis. There's a lot of overlap between the two. And then the sensory processing thing is not necessarily as defined as the other two. I feel like that's kind of when you don't really meet criteria for either one, but we still have these other kind of, like the name says, sensory processing issues. what's happening, what we're finding now more is like, at least because it's been more studied, more easy to, well, we're getting better at evaluating it, is we're seeing like the interplay between like, it's called ADHD now, is the autism spectrum and ADHD stuff, which is something that like I've been noticing more with myself, was like, oh, that's it's not like, not all ADHD. And there's some overlap. Like there's definitely like the Venn diagram, there's definitely a middle section where it's just both ADHD and autism have this stuff. But autism also kind of like, that explains, it gives you a better explanation for what's going on when you look at both versus just separate. And like I was talking about earlier, it's like also sometimes once we treat the ADHD stuff with some medication and behavioral techniques, we're like, oh, this is now the autism is presenting more. Autism is not really like, it's not medication that you specifically take.
Autism is such a broad diagnosis, and we're still understanding it. And same with the processing disorders, like the auditory verbal processing disorders. We're still learning so much about what that is and how that can present, and it can be very different, that it can take a minute to figure out which parts of it are more present for you. Do you have an example of something that, once you peel back ADHD, makes you go, oh, that's probably autism and not the ADHD?
So there is the so for me it was like ADHD, that explained a lot of more like the kind of more functional impairment stuff, like a very hyperactive, maintaining attention was difficult and that kind of stuff. Then we started like getting that stuff sussed out, and then I got to some more of like difficulty with social cues was becoming something that I had never thought about before. But growing up as always being the person that was always informed by other people about how like, you're weird. Like I got a lot of "you're weird," or a lot of like, I didn't even notice until way later that people were like that, like, you know, I was like either getting made fun of, or also that like more people were even like being nice to me, and I had no idea. Like, it was not reading the cues the same, which is more of the autism spectrum stuff than the ADHD. There's some, but like with it's also like the struggling with social cues and that kind of stuff is, for me, was where I was like, oh, that is, that's really, because once I started to manage the ADHD stuff, that was still present. And I was like, there is no med for figuring out if someone's hitting on you or not. I've also, as I've gotten older, I've gotten much more comfortable about being flat out and being like, hi, I need you to be direct. Are you trying to hit on me? Okay, great. Let's go from there. But like, you know, for years, like I just didn't pick up on it. And I would have friends be like, so that person hit on you. And I was like, no, they were being nice. And they're like, no, it was the most blatantly obvious person trying to, like, you know, and you're just not picking up on it. Or with people that, like, you know, or you're saying something that is offending somebody and you're just not picking up on it.
Yeah.
There's the ADHD that would be like just impulsively saying stuff and there's like flies out of your mouth. And then you immediately go, oh, that was, ooh. Versus I just said it and I don't even understand why that's not socially where we should be going.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. How do gender identity and queerness intersect with neurodivergence? Why are so many queer people late diagnosed?
Well, I would say there is a higher instance of neurodiversity in the queer population.
Mhm.
I think it's not like full on double, I think, but it's much higher.
Almost.
It's close. And as far as like preventing diagnosis is, if you're a queer person, most of us grew up for a large section of our life masking who we are, covering it up, trying to act as normal as possible. So, you know, if you're not even comfortable in your own skin and how you are perceived in the world and all of that, you're working really hard to cover all that up. You're not going to want to go meet with somebody and be like, hi, I think I'm different. It's not always a safe place to point to highlight your difference.
Yeah. There's also a lot of times the difference gets pinned on queerness instead of looking at the different elements of a person. So especially if you grew up in a very heteronormative household, in a very heteronormative community, they're going to be like, oh, well, you know, that's Renae. They're different. They're like that. And it's just going to keep getting pushed off as like, they're different. Instead of, okay, can we name the fact that there's gender, sexuality stuff, and that doesn't have anything to do with how they're reading or what cues they're picking up on or all of these other things. And so it can get really mushed together when you're growing up in an environment that isn't educated on this stuff. And most people aren't, because it's a lot of nuance.
And we've also touched on this in the podcast, I believe, in other certain episodes, but especially with queer and particularly like trans people coming in to get mental health assessments, and your cis het provider is getting hung up on the fact that you use they pronouns, and they want to talk about your gender dysphoria, and you're actually like, I'm actually not having gender dysphoria. I know who I am. I'm late for work. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm forgetting to mail. Like, I should just realize I forgot to mail something for the last 3 days because I have. It is not important to my brain. But if I'm seeing a provider, and sometimes there's that extra barrier that we face of them being like, whoa, I want to see what's going on with this part. And you're like, actually, that part's fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
all this other stuff that I need help with. So I think that has a lot to do with like why a lot of our community is not going to be as diagnosed. Also, a lot of our community's got a lot of medical trauma, and we don't want to go in.
Oh, 100%.
I worked so hard as a young person to not go see anybody about this, to not acknowledge it. Like, was definitely not. I was like, I don't want to go because they're going to try and, remind me how different I am. I don't want to see that. I don't want to hear it, which can be a huge barrier.
I mean, before I started working in healthcare, it was a mess. It was people telling me it's in my head, that it's not real, that I'm making it up, that I just need to do these basic things like take Tylenol and everything will be fine. It was like stupid shit that didn't make any sense. And it wasn't until I started working in healthcare and then learning from all my colleagues to be like, okay, you go in and you only tell them this, you don't tell them the other thing. Like, if you want XYZ, you need to say, okay, I asked for this, you're denying me coverage, put that in my notes. And all of a sudden a shitty provider will be like, oh, okay, we'll do that. Like, there's all of these tricks that you have to know how to do, and there's no way to really learn that. And like, that's one of the good things about social media is people are talking about that more, so you can find that out. But it's messed up that it even has to be a thing.
There's also the misinformation on social media with all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's there's lots of barriers.
Yeah. Hey, Renae popping in just for a minute to say thank you for listening. We really hope you are enjoying the conversation today. Any chance you have to rate, review, subscribe, and share with a friend makes a huge impact, and we greatly appreciate it. If you have extra bandwidth and want to support the show even further, you can go to mytherapistisout.com and click the donate button. Any donations from $5 a month to a one-time donation makes a huge difference for us. We're a little self-published podcast, so any extra dollar helps. Again, go to mytherapistisout.com and hit donate. Now back to the show. Okay, let's go to some relationships and communication things. How can I better communicate with a partner, friend, or coworker who is neurodivergent without being patronizing? I feel like this is a big one.
Ask them. It's a real good one. Also, it's also because like, if there are breakdowns in communication that are happening, and you can highlight them preferably in like a neutral way and be like, hey, is there a better way for us to go about this? Like, is there a way that you would prefer that works better for you? Like, there's certain people are going to respond to different kinds of communication better. It really depends on the person, but also, it's important to come at it not as like, hey, you've got this problem, how do we fix it? Versus like, hey, we're having a problem in how we're communicating. How can we work that out?
Yes, it gets really tricky with things like rejection sensitivity and pathological demand avoidance or demand rejection. I forget which one it is. When somebody doesn't have insight into the fact that they have those things, or they're being triggered and those things are coming up. And that gets really tricky because it's can feel like you're walking on eggshells and you're doing all of this stuff to try to not trigger it so you can have a communication with your friend or loved one. And if they're not aware that that is something that they have, or if they're not aware that they're neurodiverse, but you're kind of clocking, hey, I think this might be what's happening, they may not be open to that conversation.
No. And also that is a great way to get them to shut it down and shut themselves down. Like there's a stand-up comedy. He was like, "Hey, I was talking about, hey, I've heard one of the best symptoms of ADHD is that you can diagnose everybody else with ADHD." People don't, if they're not bringing it up, they probably don't want to go there. But also sometimes you can also kind of help and like not necessarily drop hints, but be like, "Hey, I've noticed like we keep not doing this thing, and or like this is where we have this problem over and over again," and you can talk about it in your own head with neurodivergence in mind without necessarily having to acknowledge it. It's harder. And because, we're not all, we can't fill our entire lives with people that have all done all of the work and blah, 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 and they're all open to that. Because you can't live in that space all the time. At the same time, yeah, I would say definitely like approaching it with care. Be like, hey, I'm invested in our relationship, which is why I'm bringing this up. Because I like you. I like being around you. Like, definitely, there's the compliment sandwich technique. And also sometimes, like, especially with neurodivergent people, sometimes direct conversation is the best thing and what we were waiting for the whole time. In my own experience, I do like some direct conversation. Sometimes it hurts my feelings. But I can get farther with, okay, that hurt my feelings. Why did that hurt my feelings? Was this something done that I was like, with any malintent or anything? And like most of the time it's not. I've also somebody who works in mental health who's been through lots of therapy. So, I had to learn those skills, but I also would never have like gone to learn those skills had it not been brought up. There's things about like different neurodivergent traits that I have that I wasn't aware of until people that were like, hey, like, did you know? Also, like sometimes that was brought to my attention in a not so nice way. And those are things that I tried to hide more. And there are sometimes they're like, hey, have you noticed this is just kind of this is part of you? I love it. It's weird, but also we need to be able to get like with a partner, some people like are going to be really offended if they realize you've been telling them a time that's half an hour before they're supposed to be places because they're always late. And there's other friends that are like, thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
And it just depends on how, like, I would say centering the relationship in the conversation is probably the best way, is to be like, hey, I'm doing this because I care.
Yeah, that's really important. And leading, you said this, but really leading with that. And also acknowledging what might be the person's personality. So if somebody is doing something that's hurtful to you and you've couched it in, well, this is part of their neurodiversity, that's just because we're neurodiverse people doesn't mean that we aren't as accountable and responsible for our actions in our relationships. I think there's like a hall pass that people want or expect or give that is really detrimental, and where some of this patronizing stuff can come in because they're like, well, I guess I have to excuse the fact that they're always going to say this shitty thing to me. It's like, no, you can say like, hey, that hurts my feelings. Don't do that.
Yeah. And even if you're neurodivergent, you can listen. People can change. I mean, a lot of friendships that I have had over the years, like kind of things are accepted in certain ways, but also these are people that like I know I've been around, like we've been in each other's lives for a long time, and you kind of naturally get to know these things. But also sometimes they've needed a direct conversation, be like, this is a thing that is happening that is not okay for me.
Next question. What does emotional regulation look like for neurodivergent people, and how can loved ones help without trying to fix them?
I mean, it can look different for everybody, as we kind of always say, but sometimes it may be just kind of like having that insight to know that you're like being able to pick up on your own cues that you're not okay. Because a lot of us, again, especially like we're talking about like a queer population, have often like had a lot of their experience and feelings invalidated a lot, and figuring out that you're not okay before you're really not okay is hard for everybody, but especially in the neurodivergent experience. Sometimes you're like, I don't know why my feelings went to 11 suddenly.
How do you help without trying to fix somebody? Like, one of the things that I think it's demonized or generalized is, oh, that person is flaky. And I know within our friend group, there's been a lot of conversation about changing that to bandwidth. Like, if I have to cancel plans, I'm like, hey, I love you so much. I just don't have the bandwidth to be able to do this. And within our friend group, nobody's holding each other to a flaky standard. It's like, oh, my friend is saying like, hey, they're overwhelmed. Too much is happening. Like, they don't have the emotional capacity for this. And that's not a reflection of the relationship. So also really not taking things personally if one of your friends comes to you and is like, yo, I'm not regulated. I don't have the bandwidth. I'm not in a place to do this.
And well, the other thing is we've also, in our friend group, we've kind of normalized that. And also there's also a limit. If somebody doesn't show up for things they're supposed to show up for on a regular basis, you can acknowledge it and be like, there's flaky, and then it's like, okay, this is a pattern, and either like, you're not okay, and we need, like, you need help, or sometimes it's like, hey, it's like maybe you just didn't notice that you've canceled on the same person several times in a row, and you're like, what's going on? You know, there is definitely accountability that can be had. At the same time, you know, there's also changing the language that you use can be very helpful in
Totally.
hey, it is only a couple years ago that I learned the term overstimulated. I just didn't think it was a thing that was possible. And then I was like, remember when I first moved to LA, there was like, went to a party, and I was like, I'm overstimulated. I just figured out I have to go be quiet. And like ran home and gardened with my neighbor for an hour, and then came back and was like, okay, I'm better now. And I, you know, but that took, I mean, I was 40 by the time that happened for the first time. So, you know, it's a process. But if I didn't have that language and didn't have our friend group that uses that kind of language already, it wouldn't, you know, that's what being regulated looks like for me. Sometimes I have to go.
Yeah. It's also can be fun. Like, I think people take this so seriously. It's like, this is a giant puzzle for everybody, right? Like, we're all trying to figure out, even if you're not neurodiverse, like, we're all trying to figure out what we need to do to be happy, healthy, regulated, live in our life. And when the world changes or our circumstance changed, or there's a fascist in power and violence happening everywhere, we all need different things. So it can be a puzzle of like, hey, I've got extra bandwidth. Does somebody need something? Hey, I have no bandwidth. I'm going to disappear for 2 days. I love you so much. I'm going to be in my shed breaking sticks apart and making fire starters. That's less pyro than it came out. But it doesn't have to be big and heavy and there's a problem. It can be like, let's figure out the puzzle pieces that are needed and how they fit together.
Yeah. And then, you know, again, especially like in our friend group, we don't function the same as other friend groups because most of us are neurodivergent. But in that, you know, it's creating the space to have the conversations can be really helpful in like actually being regulated. Is, you know, having the language to be like, you know what, that was too loud. I had to leave. But also, you know, when things are too loud, I have to leave. So, you know, like it's that like respect and also having realistic expectations of your friends.
Yeah. Okay, we got 2 more.
Yeah.
How do I explain my neurodivergence to others, especially when I don't look like I have it?
I've kind of adopted the technique of just going straight in and being like, I'm gonna name it before we have to. I'm gonna name it. Hey, like I used to really have a lot of shame around it, as most people do. And then I finally got to the point where I was like, this is my superpower. I am super fun. I will also definitely forget something. So just put it out there. I don't really know what it's like to have that experience of like not looking like you have it. But that's because I have a fairly severe presentation.
Well, you wiggle it. I mean, that goes into a lot of stereotypes about like what it looks like to have it and not have it. And I love the just like naming it, like when you see it happening, be like, oh, by the way, I got this, and like moving on. Just kind of like gender stuff, right? Oh, I use they, them, and move it on. And like,
Right.
instead of like, oh, we have to sit down and talk about, I mean, just let people know about you. And if they have a shitty response, guess what? That red flag is a real easy thing to be like, okay, cool, clocked that red flag. I'm gonna go hang out with somebody else.
Right. And if it's and sometimes that's in professional settings, like, I mean, my current work has been really great. But my supervisor's like, let me know what accommodations you need. And I was like, when I figure out what those are, I'll let you know. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's different things also, like, you know, in the different settings, it can also feel safer to do that than others. I just didn't realize I was doing it so much when I started nursing school until I realized that everyone was coming to me with their questions because I was the first person they'd ever met that was in a graduate program and also was as self-identifying as neurodivergent. Because they're like, one person even was like, well, no one, someone with ADHD wouldn't be in this graduate level program. And I was like, excuse me? But at the same time, that's like also a choice I was making to do my own, to like, I'm like, I feel safe enough in this environment to make myself known. And also that was harmful and uninformed. Let me
Mm-hmm.
inform you that I happened to be in a unique place where I felt safe and supported enough to do that. Not everybody's there.
That's an important thing to note is there's not all spaces, especially with work and out in the world, where you want to name that. Okay, one more. What's the best way to navigate conflict when one or both people in a relationship are neurodivergent?
I mean, it depends on on the relationship. But again, I feel like kind of establishing what language we're going to be using can be
Mm-hmm.
really helpful to have. If you're both using the same word but mean different things, that word's not useful. I don't know. I definitely have dated some people that they haven't been assessed, but I kind of assume are
Mm-hmm.
neurospicy as well, and on the autism spectrum, not the ADHD. And it was like a process of like, how are we going to communicate about this? Because we're both saying the same thing and it's not going through. So how do we rework that? Naming it is very important, but also, you know, you can't name it for someone else. So
Yeah.
if you both know, that's great. You've already many steps ahead. Doesn't mean there's no bumps, but it means that you probably both have similar language to use to describe what's going on.
Yeah. This is where it's so important to know yourself and be doing your own work, because in this, you got to know what's yours and what's not. And Chris and I have been talking about this a lot lately, so hopefully they don't mind. I'm going to put us on blast. But our neurodiversities are butt heads a lot, not in like argument ways. And we've known each other for 15 plus years at this point. But we're able to ask for a temp check or see if something's happening for somebody else and redirect the way that we're saying something, so the conversations can get back to what the intention of the conversation is. But we're both people who do a lot of our own work and come into conversations when things aren't clicking to be like, hey, my intention is this. I feel like that might not be coming across. Or is there something that I'm saying that's not working for you or is hurting you? And like currently checking in on if that's working or not. And I know that's been really helpful for me when Kristen's come and been like, hey, can you reword this thing that was really triggering or like not helpful? And that's kept us, hopefully they agree, able to really collaborate and continue a really positive relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially when we're talking about like interpersonal relationships and romantic relationships, whatever, having the ability to check in and recognizing the need to check in is a big deal. It's like, you know, some people are very uncomfortable with it, and there's probably people that aren't ready to have a conversation about
Mm-hmm.
that. It's also maybe not their communication style. You know, there can be different approaches, but as long as like we're kind of like, hey, we just in every any relationship whatsoever, there may be the need for check-in, and to name it and recognize it can be really, really helpful. It doesn't make the problem go away. Naming something doesn't make it go away. But at the same time, naming it means we can start to deal with it and unpack it and be like, hey, like, I'm checking in because I'm seeing these things, I'm seeing these behaviors, which at this other time meant this. Does it mean that still? Like, that's a big one, is sometimes you're like, well, like, I don't have to have different partners that were like, well, this happened and this happened, so you were going to feel this way. And I was like, oh, no. That's not how that worked at all. But had we not had, like, otherwise we're just going to continue assuming things about the other person's experience that are just wildly inaccurate.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me for Q&A part 1. We will be back. Mike and I will be back in 2 weeks to answer the next set of questions about daily life and functioning and healing, identity, and some self-acceptance. In the meantime, here is your queer moment of joy.
Okay, my name is Chi, and my pronouns are she. And my queer moments is just like hanging out with my friends and just having the best time of our lives.
Hi, my name is Paige. My pronouns are she, her, and my moment of queer joy was coming out to my friends in LA, and I felt so accepted and loved, which was very different than coming out to my friends in Oklahoma, which is where I grew up. So coming out a second time in LA was a very healing experience and very joyful.
Thanks for joining us. If you're in California and looking for a therapist, visit our website at openspacetherapycollective.com and book a free intro call with one of our therapists. If you're enjoying My Therapist Is Out, please rate, review, and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Do you know somebody who could use a little extra dose of queer community? Send them one of your favorite episodes of My Therapist Is Out and help our collective grow one listen at a time. My Therapist Is Out is an open space therapy collective podcast, and our podcast editing is done by Rachel Peltzer and Smash and Grab Studio. We'd love to hear from you about today's topic, so email us at info@openspacetherapycollective.com. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Open Space Therapy Collective. Thanks for listening.